So we're going to go back to the year 1608 before we get into this Bible, because I'm going to draw a little parallel, just like what it says up there. 1608. How many years ago was that? Oh, yeah, good. Thank you. What would I do without you? You're pretty much right, though. At least you said something. It is a lot of years ago, people. 1608. Now, we're in North America. That's where our story takes place. And there's a boy who's about 12. His full name is Tisquantum, or as more commonly he's known by name, Squanto. And Squanto was a Padawan brave. And he's hanging out there. They like to do things like catch lobsters, him and his guys. And they see a sailing vessel come in. Now, these sailing vessels, they dealt with them before because they'll trade stuff. You know, the Padawan braves will see these Spanish sailing vessels, and they'll be like, hey, we got these furs. And the Spanish will be like, hey, we got these beads. And so they trade stuff, right? So they're like, hey, we're going to trade. So the Spaniards have food. So they're like, great. All right. And they're like, hey, yeah, come get this. But instead of trading with, like usually, they snatch these boys and throw them in the hold. 12-year-old boy snatched, thrown into a ship, and he's down there for a long time. He doesn't know where he's going. But when he gets out, this man, this 12-year-old, is in Europe. He's in Spain. What do you think they're going to do to him and the Padawan Braves? Why do you think they brought him there? Sell him into slavery. That's exactly what they're going to do. So all these other young boys are getting sold by different Spaniards. They're buying these folks. And then there's a group of monks. You guys know what a monk is? Short for monkey? Just kidding. That's not accurate. Never repeat that. A monk is someone who's made a vow within the Roman Catholic Church to be celibate, sometimes quiet, and hang out with God all day and their fellow brothers with funny haircuts. True story. And they wear Jedi robes as well. Just kidding. That's where the Jedi got it. It's from the monk robes. So these Spanish monks were some good guys. You know what they did? They had saved their pennies, not literally pennies, you get the idea, to do what? Their plan was to buy back one of these boys because they knew this was wrong, what was happening. They weren't in control of it. They're going to buy back one of them to give them their freedom. So guess what? They buy Squanto. And all of a sudden, these monks are treating Squanto much better than all these Spaniards were treating them. And he's like, hey, these guys are all right. They're being nice to them. They teach him the heavenly language, Espanol, right? I don't know what they feed him. Yeah, what do you guys think Squanto's getting to eat there in 1608? Beans? Okay, we'll just be beans. Chicken, maybe some chicken, frijoles, pollo, huh? The orphan's chips, stuff like that, right? And they teach him the gospel. And he's like, oh, okay. So listening to the gospel here in the gospel, look, we're going to get you back where you came from. We know this isn't your home. We know what was wrong. But here's the thing. We got to get you to England to do that because that's where these ships are heading out to go where you're from. So they get him to England to another Christian family. And now he's in England. So guess what language he learns now? English. He learns the King's English. That's right. And so now he knows his native language, plus he knows Spanish and he knows English. He waits and he waits and he waits and he waits in London, England, and he waits and he waits and he waits. And then one day, 1618. So how many years has it been? 10 years. That's right. Thank you. You got it this time. That was better. 10 years. And he's going back to his house. He's so excited. You know the whole land ho! They do that thing, right? Yeah, I get there. And he's excited. He gets off where his village is. He's thinking somebody's going to meet him. And he goes, and the village is a ghost town. Nobody's there. Where'd everybody go? he's like, yo, I thought I was trusting God. And then, I came back and like nobody's here. So he goes into the forest and he's just like tripping out. He's just wandering around, He's 22 at this time. All his people are not where they're supposed to be. Well, there's a guy though who kind of knows him a little bit named Samoset, and he comes where Squanto is, and Samoset's English. He knows a little bit of English because he's traded with Spaniards too, and English. Samoset knows a little bit, and Samoset had met these people who moved into the neighborhood. These people moved into the neighborhood, right? And he's like, Samoset tells Squanto, hey, these people, can you help me talk to them? Your English is better. Squanto's like, yeah, sure. I'm not doing anything else but just wandering around in the forest having an existential crisis. So he goes, and the English are there, with their funny hats and stuff, right? And Squanto's like, hey, you got any beer? And the English are shocked. That's the first thing he acted. You got any beer? And they're like, did this Native American dude just come into our village and ask us for a beer without a shirt on? So they get him a beer, right? But they're like, how did you learn English? He tells them the story. They are shocked. Squanto was like, hey, the English people were kind of nice to me once a long time ago. Maybe I'll help these people out. They're literally in my old neighborhood because they moved right beside his village where it was at this point. And they're like telling him their story. They came from England to go to the New World because they wanted religious freedom, because they were Puritans. Puritans are English Calvinists, meaning they are Reformed, and they were not really welcome where they were at, so they go to this place. They call it Plymouth, and the place in honor of where they came from. They've had some hard times. Half their people are dead. They don't know what they're doing. Squanto's like, I grew up here. Let me teach you. Squanto teaches them everything. Plus, he's their translator. So all of a sudden, they can make communication with some of the other tribes in the area that have similar languages. And he's teaching them how to properly hunt and fish and catch the eels. I guess that's what they ate, eels. Who wants to eat eels? I don't want to eat eels, but when you're starving, you eat stuff. Yeah. So things got along so well between the other tribe, it's Samoset's tribe, and the Pilgrims, that they decide to celebrate because they've had a great harvest. And they come together, and 90 braves come from Samoset's tribe, and they bring deer and turkey and everything. And they have parties and games for 3 days. Guess what that's known as? The first Thanksgiving. So all these people that tell you, oh, don't celebrate Thanksgiving, it celebrates the slaughter of. The first Thanksgiving was about friendship between Pilgrims and the tribes in the area, and they were thanking God. Now, the Pilgrims are thanking God, and they made that clear to the native folks. They had their own gods or ideas, Great Spirit, that type of thing. And Squanto was right along there, so they're celebrating, they're thinking. And, this is a good thing. And the Pilgrims are very thankful to Squanto. And you know what they tell him? They say, you're kind of like this guy in our Bible, this Bible. There's a guy named Joseph. Joseph was sold into slavery, but through his pain, God used it to save many people during his day. And they saw a historical parallel between Squanto's life and Joseph's life, because these English Calvinists looked everything through the lens of Scripture. All you got to do is read William Bradford's book. This is how we get a lot of the information. It's called Of Plymouth Plantation. Plantation back then didn't mean a place you had slaves, because there wasn't slaves there. It just meant a place where you're living and growing crops. And so he writes, he's the governor, and he writes all these things that happen and explains what's going on. Now, that's just a historical parallel, Squanto and Joseph, understand? But Joseph, who's to be found in our Bibles, if you could turn to Genesis chapter 50, I'm going to draw your attention to one particular verse here. Joseph is a type of Christ. So just like there's some parallels between Squanto and Joseph, there are divinely orchestrated parallels between the life of Joseph and the life of Jesus Christ. So do you see there it says Joseph as a type of Jesus? I'm going to explain what that means. But first, can I read you our main verse here today? Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. Are you guys in verse 20? Listen to this and look along, okay? This is such a great verse. Joseph's brothers had sold him into slavery, and they were feeling bad about what they did. And they were also worried Joseph was going to get revenge. Listen to what Joseph says to his brothers who betrayed him 20 some years earlier in verse 20. Are you ready? We'll start in 19. Joseph said to them, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today." Isn't that a great verse? You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Never forget that verse, because everything you go through, you can say, this was meant for evil by the devil, by those who perpetrated it, but God meant it for good. We're going to explain what that means by looking at the life of Joseph here together. But this is the verse we're driving towards to land on. And this is a beautiful thing. And to do this, I'm going to have to kind of take a whirlwind survey tour of Genesis 37 through 50. Because do you realize the story of Joseph in the Bible picks up around chapter 37? And it starts when he is 17 years old and he starts having dreams. But even earlier than that, there's something special about Joseph to his father. See, Joseph's dad had more than one woman. And Joseph's dad had a favorite woman, Rachel. She only gave him 2 kids. Leah gave him more, the majority, in fact, of his 12 sons. They had some others as well. So Joseph was favored by his father, Jacob, aka Israel, because Jacob liked the mom better. Now, that's not right, but that's what happened. Jacob favored Joseph. Now, that may seem a strange place to start, but let's start there. The parallel between Joseph and Jesus is that both are loved by their father. Now, obviously, God the Father's love towards God the Son is not a sinful or biased love, but it is a unique love. Yes, God loves you, but he loves Jesus even more. I think we can say that. Why? Because he has to put God above all. Otherwise, he's violating the idea of don't put any other things before God. And when I'm saying that, I'm just trying to get you to understand by the emphasis there that Jesus, the Son, and God the Father have a special, unique relationship. We come later. We're adopted into the family at a great cost to God. But yet there's a permanent bond between the Father and Son. It's a perfect love. So we see that right there from jump. And when I say that Joseph is a type of Jesus, type is a literary term. You know, like illusion, or the hero of the story is often called the protagonist. What's the villain of the story called? There's a fancier, antagonist. You got it? Yeah. The antagonist versus the protagonist. For example, when Moby Dick, who's the protagonist? Is it the captain or the whale? Interesting. Or is the sea a character? Anyways, we're not going all there. But the point is that you have these literature elements, and the Bible's literature, so it has elements of literature, and one of the elements of literature is called a type. But this has theological significance. When you have a type, you have something that's set up over here on this side. Maybe it's better to do this. Over here on this side, because it's representing the Old Testament. And it shadows or foreshadows, prefigures the thing that gets amplified and brought to further light over here on this side. Usually it's within the Old and New Testament. So you have type, and the fulfillment of the type is called the antitype. It sounds weird when you hear it. It doesn't mean the opposite. It means the fulfillment, antitype. So it doesn't mean like opposite of. The type and the antitype. So Joseph is a type of Christ. Christ is the antitype of Joseph. Now, This is a biblical concept. In Hebrews, the author specifically does this with Jesus and Melchizedek. Whenever you have Jesus saying things like, I'm greater than Moses, he's making a parallel there. But yet he's the ultimate fulfillment of it. Paul describes it as shadow versus substance. So this is a biblical concept all throughout Scripture. And we start off there. To the next one, Joseph is hated by his brothers. Why do you think Joseph's brothers hated him? Yeah, one reason is because he had dreams. And he told a dream, and he said, I had a dream. And in it, my sheave, he's talking about what he bundled up for the farming, it went out, and you guys had sheaves, and all your sheaves bowed down to my sheave. I'm like, you're telling me you had a dream that we were going to bow down to you? Yeah, I got another one. The sun, the moon, and the stars also bow down to me in the dream. And they're like, bro, why? There's some things you shouldn't tell people probably, right? They didn't like that. They're like, who do you think? It's bad enough that dad likes you better than us. Now you're having dreams about us bowing down to you. They did not like Joseph. Plus, he was younger, on the younger side. He wasn't the youngest. So he's also that hated baby, right one step above, at the bottom of the. See, they did not like him. Well, Jesus is hated by his brothers. In the Gospel of John, it says he came into his own, and his own knew him not. Most Jewish people did not accept Jesus Christ. Hated by his own brothers, the ones who should have understood the most, did not understand. And really, ultimately, it's without cause, because we see a level of righteousness. Now, Joseph's still a human, but we see a life that is a stellar example of what it means to be righteous. So one of these dreams that Joseph had foretold his future rulership. And he was hated for his words, just like Christ would be. But also, Jesus foretold his future rulership. When he was on trial, they said things like, tell us plainly, are you the Messiah? He said, you're going to see me at the right hand of the Father coming back. He said, yo, what else do we need to hear? Look at this guy's awful. Blasphemy, ripped his clothes, right? They didn't like that, but it was true. And guess what? Joseph's dream's going to become true by the end of our historical account as well. Now, one of the ways that dad shows that he liked Joseph better was he gave him that fresh drip. He gave him that fly gear. Understand? What did he give him? He gave him the original Coogee sweater. You guys know what a Coogee is? It's like a sweater. It's got the rainbow stripes. Biggie used to wear them. You know what it is, Christine? So you didn't say yeah, though. See, participate. Don't hate. Participate. Yes, see, I knew you knew. That's why I asked you specifically. Well, so he gave him a coat of many colors. This is in a day where you might just have a plain old this and that. And yeah, Joseph's dad had some money, but everybody's not getting a coat of many colors. You know, this is like there's Walmart, there's Target, and there's all that other stuff, those stores I don't know the name of because I can't go there or afford it anyway, but there's those other places, right? And that's where he's given him. Well, when Joseph's brothers get so sick of him, guess what they do? They take him, they grab him, and they rip off his coat of many colors, and they throw him in the bottom of a well. He gets stripped of his robe, just like Jesus when he's arrested and the Roman soldiers rip his robe off. They don't rip it, though, because they don't want to tear it, because they want to gamble for the garment. So they're playing craps to see who gets the garment. Oh, backdoor little Joe, I get it, right? That's what happened. You guys ever played craps? Does anyone understand the reference? Does anyone understand the reference, backdoor little Joe? Huh? Yeah, okay. It's when you get 2 4s in a row and then you win. Pastor Gabe, what's backdoor little Joe mean? See, he knew what to do. Yeah, okay. You people need to be culturally aware of all generations. Okay, so here's what happens, though. He's stripped of his robe, and what do they do? What do? They take it, and they kill an animal and dipped the robe in blood. Now, why do you think his brothers did that? This is all in the scripture. We're going through the scripture in case you don't understand what's happening. Like right now, we're in Genesis chapter 37, verse 12. I'm just summarizing. Why do you think they killed an animal and dipped his robe in the blood? Yeah, so they took it back and they said, hey, Dad, we found this in the field. What do you think it means, Dad? We don't know, but look, this is all we found, Dad. It's awful, isn't it, Dad? Isn't this the robe you got him, Dad? His dad is heartbroken. Sees a bloody robe. He's like, that costs a lot of money. Just kidding. That's not the main reason he's heartbroken. Right? Interesting, though, because you have a bloody sacrifice. Now, Joseph himself is the one that dies, but his dad thought he died. So at the end of the story, it's sort of like a resurrection because his dad is going to realize Joseph is not dead. Do you see the types and shadows there? But he's stripped of his robe. And what do? They're like, hey, let's kill him. Let's kill him, bro. Reuben's the oldest. He's like, I don't think we should kill him. And Reuben was going to like go rescue him or something later. He's like, I should take care of little Joe, you know. Like in Bonanza. You guys understand that reference? Only in the back do they get it. So here's what happens. Here's what happens. Here's what happens. Some Ishmaelites go by. An Ishmaelite is sort of like ancestors to modern day Arabs. I'm not saying it's a one-to-one correlation, but roughly speaking. Ishmaelite goes by. They're in a caravan, all right? Not a Dodge, but a caravan of camels, right? They're like, hey, what you got there? And like, we got some human merchandise. They're like, hey, we don't need to kill him. Let's make some money. Let's make some money off this guy. So they sell Joseph to these traders that are going by for the price of a slave. Jesus was sold, betrayed by who? Judas. And guess what? The fourth brother is named Judah. Judas is named after Judah. It's essentially the same word. So Judas Iscariot is named after Judah from the fourth son. So he's sold by someone that's supposed to be his buddy, to say the least, his own brother, for the price of a slave. That's how much Judas got for Jesus. So now he's going to go into a whole new life because these Ishmaelite traders go into where? Egypt. They go into Egypt. And then he becomes a servant. What does Philippians 2 say about Jesus? It says that he did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but for our sakes became a servant. He willingly laid down his divine prerogatives, Jesus Christ, to become a servant for our sakes. Now, you understand in these types, they're not 100% identical. Joseph did this against his will. Christ willingly went. That's why Christ is always the superior and the fulfillment. You follow? So here, you see now Joseph. Now, what should he do? You ever had something bad happen to you? Yes, you have. None of you have been sold into slavery in a foreign country, though. Otherwise, we wouldn't be chilling here. If you have, please tell us so we can get you some help. If there's something we do not know, please explain it to us. We will rescue you. Blink twice, you know? So, this is real life stuff. Some of you were like, if God's really real, why did he let my tire get flat again on the way to work? Joseph is sold into slavery by his own brothers. If he was like most of you, he'd be on like social media. It's always those who are supposed to love you who stop. These kind of posts, you know? That's y'all. Hashtag betrayal by a friend. I'll never trust again. One thing about me though, you can ask anybody, one thing about me, all this stuff, right? Okay. You guys know because it's real. Don't be that guy. Don't be that girl. But he says, I'm going to work as best as I can in this situation. He's a slave. He's not working at McDonald's for minimum wage. He is a slave. Understand? Yes. But he does so well. Potiphar, his boss who bought him, who's like captain of the guard, puts him in charge of his whole household. He's like, yo, you're a very trustworthy young man. I can trust you with all my stuff. Puts him in charge of everything. And the wife is watching this. It's like, this Joseph guy, he's always around the house. He's smart. He's intelligent. He's young. Perhaps I can seduce him. So Miss Potiphar tries to seduce Joseph. Joseph doesn't stand and have a conversation with her. He runs out of the room, and she grabs his coat, though. Poor guy, always getting his coat jacked. She grabs his coat, and then she goes, hashtag me too. And she says, look what happened. Your servant tried to rape me. And guess what the penalty for trying to rape, like the captain of the guard would be? It would be death. But for some reason, Potiphar doesn't kill Joseph. You know what I think? I don't think Potiphar believed the wife. But he can't let it stand 100%. So he throws him into prison. Really, he should have killed him if it was a true accusation. He does not kill him. So even in the false accusation, you still see God's grace and mercy working in Joseph's life. False accusations. You've had to deal with that. But guess what happens? He starts taking care of the other prisoners. He displays leadership even in the prison. So much so that the guys in charge of the prison pretty much allow him to kind of run his cell block type thing. If you read the story, you'll see. And then something happens. A couple guys come in there, and they used to work for Pharaoh, and they have some dreams, and they tell Joseph their dreams, and by the power of God, he interprets the dreams. And you know what the interpretation is? One guy's going to get his job back. He's going to get something. The other guy's going to lose something. He's going to lose his head. One guy's going to get out, and Joseph says, when you get out, remember to tell Pharaoh about me. He's like, oh, yeah, sure. The other guy can't do anything because he's going to lose his head. Well, the other guy does get out, just like Joseph said, because God told him, not because Joseph knew, oh, you had green in your dream? That means don't listen to those people. That's not in the Bible, and they don't know what they're talking about, and it's all gobbledygook, and know your dreams all don't mean something deep. They can, but come on, you're not Joseph. I'm just saying. So, do you think the guy remembers Joseph? Nope. So he's still in prison hanging out. But then one day, the Pharaoh has a dream. And Pharaoh cannot figure out this dream. Nobody else can figure out this dream either. And then all of a sudden, the guy remembers, oh yeah, I know a guy back in prison. Well, bring him to me. So Joseph comes, interprets the Pharaoh's dream. What is it, by the way, the interpretation? Short version is, Egypt is going to have 7 years of plenty, but it's going to be followed by 7 years of famine. Like, well, what do you think we should do? We'll stock up in the 7 years when you got plenty, and then that way you'll have enough for the 7 years of famine. Pharaoh takes off his bling, puts it on Joseph, says, okay, you're the guy in charge to do it. He literally goes from the prison to the palace. It would seem like overnight, but if you understand the story of Joseph, he's literally been preparing by God's decrees for this his whole life. Because he's learned responsibility. He's learned to help. He's learned this by what he's been through. So guess what? Joseph does this. He learns how to put all the extra food and save it for 7 years. But then, at the end of the 7 years, things are going to change. But let me point out another parallel. Jesus has been exalted and seated. Now, what that means is he's been lifted up to his proper place again, and he's been seated, meaning his work is finished. That's what that means when we say that. He's sitting at the right hand of the Father. That simply means in the place of favor with his work completed at this stage. And it shows his rulership too, by the way. Joseph had that same thing. He went from the lowest estate to the highest almost within Egypt, which was one of the most powerful countries in the world at that time, right? Well, 7 years is a long time not to have food. But the rest of the world didn't know about Joseph's dream, so they needed some food. So guess what? Just like Joseph took a journey into Egypt because he was sold, his own brothers now have to take a journey into Egypt. Why? To get some food. Because there's no food in Canaan where they're living. So they come and they're going on in. Joseph recognizes them. They don't recognize him. First of all, he's dressed like an Egyptian. He probably walks like one too, right? You know, he's always like this, right? They don't know who he is. He knows who they are. So he does some trials and tests to see if they've changed, and he believes they have changed. And then, through a whole bunch of ups and downs, he reveals who he is. Now, one brief thing I want to show you. This is just a map of what was happening between Canaan. Canaan is the area that Israel would go into again later, but at that time it was not called Israel. It was called Canaan at that time. And you see how Egypt, by old standards, is not that far. You know, you can get there, is what I'm saying. So this is the transportation. We have really old paintings. Now, these have been spiced up in the sense of they're all chipped away and stuff. So this is like what it would look like in its original state. We have paintings that are from the tomb of Hotep and in the cemetery of this nobleman named Ben Hassan. And they're dating from what's called the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, which is about 1900 BC, which is interesting because Joseph himself probably died around 1800 BC. So relatively contemporaneous. And it shows a group of 37 Asiatics. Asiatics are entering Egypt for what reason in this painting? To get stuff from Egypt. So if you look, you're going to have Egyptians and Asiatics. Asiatics are also known as Semites. So they would have come from that area of Canaan. And you see on the right side, the darker figures, those are the Egyptians, how they portrayed themselves. And then you see, by contrast, the Asiatics or the Canaanites. Now, these could have been Hebrews. We don't know. It doesn't say. It just describes them as Asiatics. Because they could have been, like, for example, Ishmaelites, perhaps, for example, too. So we don't know for sure. But they could have been Hebrews. But this is a real painting that shows it was a common thing to have those people go into that part of the land for various things. And that's exactly what they're doing. Now, what happens? Joseph says, "It's me." They're shocked, right? And they're like, "Yo, we got to go tell Dad." They go back to Canaan, tell Dad. They meet each other. They hug their necks. He says, "My son, whom I thought was dead, is alive." He's happy. He feels like he can go now. He feels so elated by this reunion. And Joseph is like, "Everybody come up." Their family has grown to 70 people at this time. And Joseph gives them an area of Egypt called the land of Goshen, because the Hebrews were like shepherds and whatnot. Another parallel with Christ, by the way. They were shepherds and whatnot. And the Egyptians found shepherds like kind of uncomely, you know, like shepherds. So basically that means they would be left alone there. They would be like in their own little area. And this is on friendly terms at this point. Because they're like, "Hey, it's your family. Hey, you saved us all. Bring the squad." So there they are, 70 of them. And Jacob, the dad, is getting old, and he dies. Now the brothers are starting to get worried because Pop said, "Please don't kill your brother. Could you just forgive them?" Joseph has complete power. He's right underneath Pharaoh. He could have them killed if he wanted to. And so they're afraid. So this is where we pick up. In Genesis 50, I want to read some of this to you. Tie all this together. Think about what's happening. And then you look at Genesis chapter 50. Uh-oh. Oh, man, that wasn't supposed to happen. I don't know how to go back to what I had. I don't think I can do it from here. Do you know how to make it I must have hit the wrong button to get out of there. Here, you're going to need this, won't you? You just got to make it. If you can, if you can't, whatever. I got my notes. I hit a button. It's not ideal to have the keyboard. I'd rather have a clicker. Anyways, Genesis, thank you, Micah. Either way, even if you don't get it, I appreciate it. Genesis chapter 50. Let me show you what it says. We're going to start in verse 15, okay? When Joseph's brother saw that their father was dead, they said, it may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him. So they sent a message to Joseph. Like, we don't even want to go in person, but saying, your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. So they're admitting it, so that's good. And now, please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father. So they're appealing to him. That's good. Joseph wept when they spoke to him. This is deeply emotional, as you could imagine. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, behold, we are your servants. This is, as far as apologies go, a pretty good one. They're showing humility, right? But Joseph said to them, do not fear, for am I in the place of God? He's saying that's not the way I'm going to judge you. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones. Not only am I not going to kill you, thank you, sir, but I do need that keyboard back, pretty please. Oh, you got it. Thank you. Someone double this man's pay rate. Amen. Thank you. I appreciate it. One day you'll be in charge of Egypt. Like, bro, I don't want Egypt. Give me Scottsdale. Thank you, though. So, thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. What a beautiful story of forgiveness, first of all. And that's also how he's a type of Christ. While he's on the cross, Jesus Christ says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So Joseph remained in Egypt, he and his father's house. Joseph lived 110 years. Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the third generation. He got to see some grandkids and then some. The children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were counted as Joseph's own. Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, but God will visit you and bring you up out of this land, to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here. Joseph, when he died, is saying, take my bones with you. I want to be buried in Canaan, the land we're going to take. So Joseph died, being 110 years old. They embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. So it sounds like he might have got the mummy treatment there. So I want to show you something here. This verse, Genesis 50:20, is what's called paradigmatic, meaning it should shape your paradigm. What's your paradigm? That's the way you look at something, and in fact, maybe even a lot of things. This verse is a great paradigm-shifting verse to have you properly understand the way to see things. You don't got to sit back there. I'm good, man. I feel bad. Oh, okay. I feel, okay. Look at this, though, everyone. As for you, Joseph's talking to his brothers, right? You meant, that's a Hebrew word there, shashab. But what's cool about this is you don't have to know any Hebrew to understand what I'm about to show you. That's just a little beneficial thing. Because guess what? In any good English translation, these two words I'm going to show you will be translated the same. Why? Because they're the same word. So watch this. You meant evil against me. So he's not saying, hey, yeah, he's saying, yeah, you meant evil against me. But God meant, shashab, it for good, in order to do what has happened on this day, to keep many people alive. Another way he's a type of Christ is that his sacrifices, what happened to him, paved the way for many to experience life. In this case, it was the food stuff. Now, why am I bringing this out? They meant it for evil, right? Everything they did to him. God meant it for good. It's the same word. So, some of you won't like this, but just follow along. We like to tend to say God he works with the evil, or works around the evil, or he kind of can shape it and mold it, and he can. Now that's true to an extent, but I want to show you something. This is the same word. This word, shashab, means you planned, you intended, you purposed. Understand? In fact, in the lexicon, it means to think, to plan, to devise. Especially the first two sets of definitions, especially that second line, are really the sense of this word in this context. So just like you planned this for evil, God planned this for good. So did God plan what was going to happen to Joseph? He did. If this is right, it's saying God planned it. It wasn't like God was like watching the cosmic TV. It was like, oh, shoot, look what's happening to Joseph. I better do something with that because that's not cool. God planned it already back here. That's right. Now, when Joseph is in prison, he may not have seen it. When Potiphar's wife did him dirty, he may not have seen it. At the end of his life, I think he was able to see it because of this verse. Now, we don't know if we'll ever see it. Some of you are like, well, yeah, that's cool, but I don't see how God's going to use my thing. I don't know either. But if this verse is true for those who are followers of the one true God, this verse is true for you too. But it gets deeper than that. It shows you that God is actually ordaining, making these things happen. So here's God's doing and plan, and somehow it coincides with wicked plans and evil. God's not planning evil and wicked in the sense of he wants evil and wicked to happen, but the same thing people are planning for evil, God is planning for good. This is what Joseph says here. Now, I have a couple things I was going to read that are kind of long and theological, so I'm going to skip them. Oh, you really want to see that? Okay, well, this will be the last thing we could do. Okay, she made a sound like, hey, don't skip that. So, okay, this you're going to see why. It's all right. I'm with it. So if you're like, well, I don't know about that, because that sounds like God. You see how that could be troubling, because you're like, God planned. In Joseph's case, think about what it means. He planned and ordained a kidnapping, to be sold into slavery, false accusation. It's crazy, right? Betrayal, all of that for God's glory ultimately. When Christians talk like that, I want you to know we're not crazy, because some of us have a view where God is a lot more maybe hands off of the universe, and he's like just checking out stuff with his binoculars, and every now and then, you know how when you pick up trash and you have those little clampy things, and you like do that so you can put it in the bag, like when you're doing maybe if you're lucky, when you got your community service for your probation, you got one of those maybe. Usually they just make you use gloves in the hand, but maybe you got the deluxe, you know. Sometimes people see God that way. He's like, every now and then, right? No, God is intimately involved with his creation, ordaining things. In fact, the word is providence. Providence, just like in Squanto's life, just like in Joseph's life. Now, we're not crazy, though, and what I want to show you are two little things that are actually from the 16th century. So this is 30 years or so after our friend Squanto got kidnapped. In 1644, some London Baptist Calvinists wrote up a confession, and it's got something good that I want to read to you. A confession is a statement of faith that other Christians have put together, and they talk about these issues here, and I think this is good. Just follow for a second, because some of the language is going to be a little bit different sounding. But this shows you that other Christians have thought about this and have realized this is true. God, in his infinite power and wisdom, and this is the London Baptist Confession of 1644, doth dispose all things to the end for which they were created. That's simply saying in Old English, God plans all things for how they're going to go. That's what that's saying. Doth dispose all things to the end. That means the final goal, the purpose for which they were created. That neither good nor evil befalls any by chance. This means technically Christians don't believe in luck. You see? So we don't do potlucks, we do pot blessings. Hey! Yeah. We don't believe in the luck of the Irish, we believe in the blessings of the Irish. I don't think there's any Irish folks here, though. Although a few of you may be Carlos O'Briens. That neither good nor evil befalls any by chance or without his providence. Providence is the idea of God's guiding hand in all situations. So it's not always, hello, I am God. I will fix this situation. Sometimes you don't really understand how God is doing anything. It doesn't seem like he's there. But then you see at the end and you're like, you know what? That's God's providence. In fact, the early settlers of this country believed it so much, there's a place in Rhode Island called Providence, Rhode Island. That's why they named it that. It's a theological name for that city. Unlike us, we got a mythical bird. But it still could be kind of Christian because it could imply a resurrection, perhaps. And that whosoever befalls the elect, and that whatsoever befalls the elect, that's a fancy way to say whatever bad stuff happens to Christians, is by his appointment for his glory and their good. If that sounds foreign to you, just read Romans 8:28. It won't sound as foreign to you because you'll be like, oh, that sounds like what is in the Bible there. Or you could just read Genesis 50:20. Last thing, I know this one's a little long. This is from London Baptist Confession, 1646. Hey, I got it here. I'll give it to you in a second. It's right here on my iPad. You could do the rest. I'll give it to you when I'm done, okay? This one is similar. Although all the power of the creature to act be from the Creator, it's just saying God gave us an ability to act in the world. And there is a providence of God always extended to every creature and to every action of the creature, yet we judge that the final corruption of the creature, this means sin, and the sinfulness of the creature's action is from the creature and not from God, and that it is a great sin to say that God is the author of sin. The reason why that's there is to show that even though we believe in a strong view of God's sovereignty, sovereignty means his power and control in all things, we do not charge God with sin. We understand that his brothers wanted to betray him. God didn't have to force him. They wanted to betray him. And yet God used that wicked desire because he also had a plan. And somehow those plans run parallel, but God planned the same thing for good. But he did plan it. So I just wanted to show you these two London Baptist confessions to show you that Christians have understood this. I know it's an older language, but I'm just showing you that there are those before us. Because in America, most of us get queasy sometimes when we hear about a strong view of God's sovereignty, like I talked about today, because then we're like, well, what about my free will? We start to worry about that. And I'm not saying we can't have that discussion, but I think first we should fundamentally start with God's control and then discuss how we fit into that picture. Yes, amen. All right. Here, brother, I'm going to give this to you. Here, you can see those there. Okay, so let's take a few minutes here. And again, Micah, I greatly appreciate all your help, man. I know you didn't come here to work, and yet here you are. I do appreciate it. So everyone, you slip them some chocolate and a 5 on the way out. Yeah, something like that, you know. Okay. I'm just saying, you know, a little treat or something, you know. So that is what I wanted to bring today. There's obviously more we could say. There's more ways that Joseph is a type of Christ. But that's a good place to start. We learned a little bit of history, right? And we learned Joseph's story, the big picture of it. And then we saw a little bit of how that prefigures Christ. And we learned a little bit of a theological doctrine, providence, sovereignty, whatever you want to call it. And if you ever forget all of that, just remember this verse on the screen. That's really the key of what we talked about today. It's such an important, fundamental verse. You know, you can't remember every verse. You can't paraphrase every verse, right? We're not robots. But this is one that you really can remember the big idea of this verse. This is one that you can say, okay, I know this concept. Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, just what Joseph said to his brothers. So with that, are there a few questions or comments? Because we have like 2 minutes. A few questions or comments of anything, of anybody, of any type, of any kind. Just checking. What's up? Yes. She asked, is there any truth to discoveries of Ron Wyatt because he supposedly found the grain silos? Talking about the grain silos that Joseph would have used to put the wheat and the grain in when he was storing things in Egypt. Ron Wyatt, he's passed now. He's no longer with us. Was an amateur archaeologist. He basically kind of dressed like Indiana Jones, and he would say that he found these amazing things. He claimed to have a vial of the blood of Christ, for example. No joke. Ron Wyatt is not a legitimate archaeologist. Now, that doesn't mean you couldn't do some legitimate archaeology, but by and large, he said things that were incorrect so much that you can hardly trust anything of what he said. So, is there any truth that we've discovered the grain silos that Joseph specifically used? According to Ron Wyatt, there is. I do not think Ron Wyatt is correct. Because I have a number of books that are about Old Testament archaeology, and they do have things that show the accuracy of the Bible from archaeology. But none of them are so fanciful and sort of spectacular as a lot of Ron Wyatt's. For example, Ron Wyatt has these pictures on the internet that he says there's the chariot wheels that fell off when God brought down the water upon the Egyptians in the Red Sea. Ron Wyatt claims that. It's not true. It's coral reef formations. It's not chariot wheels. The pictures could kind of look like the pattern, but when actual experts go in there and study and analyze, it's coral reef patterns. So in general, Ron Wyatt is speaking beyond his expertise and gets a lot of stuff wrong. I believe in apologetics. I believe the Bible's real history. I believe archaeology, rightly understood, will support the Bible. But Ron Wyatt almost says things that are too good to be true, basically, and usually it is. And like I said, the most elaborate example of his excess is he says he has there's a lecture online, you can find it. He claims that he had a vial of the blood of Christ. It's ridiculous, frankly. So no, I don't think we found the silos that Joseph used. Now, there are some speculative arguments made by some guys I sort of know that were at the conference I was at 2 weeks ago, that they think you can argue that some of the images within Egypt may represent Joseph, but it's super circumstantial. And it takes like a long time to understand it. And you're like, I'm not sure. It's not crazy, although most regular archaeologists would kind of laugh at us. Oh, you actually believe the Bible really happened? But you can see it's not a firm case that like some of these images represent Joseph, for example. So I would say no. In general, I would say don't listen to Ron Wyatt. If you want a better Christian archaeologist, a great guy to check out is Titus Kennedy. Titus Kennedy. He's great, has some great things he talks about, and he makes things very good to understand. Titus Kennedy would be an example of someone I would say, listen to him first. There's others. That's just the best one for biblical archaeology and Old Testament stuff. But that's a great question.